Hello, noble home dogs and pup champs. Have you been wanting to see just a little bit of new Raimi Spider-Man? Something from this iconic film series that you probably haven't seen before? This is the video for you. But with great power comes great responsibility, and I consider this platform to be a great power. Which is why before we get into this, I'm wondering if you could perhaps help me out. My old college buddy Lee is having some trouble. He's a family man, he's got a stable relationship, he's got a kid, and he's got a dog named Penny, and she's just the sweetest. The family love her very, very much, and well, you can see why. The trouble is, Penny needs life-saving spinal surgery that they can't afford, and the insurance isn't paying for it. So if you're able to, it would mean the world to me and mean the world to Lee and his family if you would check out the link in the description below to the fundraiser to help raise money for Penny's spinal surgery. Every penny counts. Okay, anyway, thank you for that. Let's dive in. One thing that I absolutely loved about the Spider-Man trilogy, besides everything about it, is these films always made a strong first impression, thanks to having these exciting title sequences that would tell the story of Spider-Man through unique visuals and a beautiful musical overture by Danny Elfman. Like when these opening titles would play and you'd hear that music, you knew you were in for something unforgettable. The first one was all about showing that this world knows no bounds with its VFX, and it gives you just little glimpses and teasers of what you're in for. You've got New York City, you've got Spider-Man, you've got the Green Goblin, and a lot of tangled webs, which in many ways sums up the movie. The second one does a little bit more in that it uses Alex Ross paintings to illustrate the events of the previous film and tell the story of Spider-Man. All the more reason to love Spider-Man 2, because what other comic book movie features artwork by one of the greatest comic book artists of all time in the opening credits? And all of the visuals and graphics around that take a more minimalistic approach, so to let Alex Ross's artwork speak for itself. The third film, in some ways, combined the approaches of 1 and 2's opening title sequences, in that it recaps the events of the previous films using frames and clips from the previous films. But you've also got sort of a digital effects showcase as well, with the symbiote moving along the webs that make the opening credits. All with a much grander rendition of the Spider-Man theme by Christopher Young. But here's what you probably didn't know. There is an alternative version of Spider-Man 3's opening credits, which was never in the final film, be it the editor's cut or the theatrical cut. Spider-Man 3 is a total cinematic curiosity, and I've already done a video earlier in the year that covers pretty much everything that was deleted out of the movie, except for this. It just seems that there's new discoveries every day when it comes to Spider-Man 3. Who would have thought that a film that came out in 2007 could continue to give us so much? All the more reason to fucking love this movie. Hee-Bok Lee is a creative director that specializes in opening credits for movies. And one of the films he worked on was Spider-Man 3. And if you go on his website, heeboklee.com, there is a whole section devoted to the opening credits of Spider-Man 3. But it's not the opening credits you're probably expecting, as these are concept sketches for a completely different idea, which I think it could be debated is actually a bit more interesting than the one we ended up with. Spider-Man 3's opening credits return to the blue aesthetic of the Spider-Man 1 opening credits, as opposed to the red aesthetic of the Spider-Man 2 opening credits. But in this version of the opening credits, they were going for a totally unique aesthetic of black and white. It begins like a normal Spider-Man opening credits, just with more of a noir sort of charcoaly black look to it, but then when the Spider-Man 3 title arrives on screen, all of that black is sucked up by the Spider-Man 3 title, before exploding into sort of black on white artwork, beginning with an eye which is then revealed to be Mary Jane Watson on the Emma Rose sign, with Peter on his scooter looking back at her, reflecting the opening sequence of Spider-Man 2, but this also kind of tells a story of who Peter Parker is, what he wants, and what stands in his way. He's looking to Mary Jane Watson, that's his goal. But notice how between him and Mary Jane is a web. The tangled web of Spider-Man is what stands between Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson, pretty much summing up the entire previous film in one frame, which then explodes into this frame from the train fight where Spider-Man lands on top of the train, represented by the inky appearance of the symbiote. Then, like in the final opening credits that we got in the film, it goes into some VFX work here as we see the hand reaching out from the symbiote, and we see different movements of that sort of symbiote as it transforms and changes and turns into almost like a black hole kind of appearance, turns into this vortex. The opening title sequence kind of returns to normal in the way that Spider-Man will once the symbiote is off of him, as the symbiote appears to dissipate from the webs, revealing the director being Sam Raimi on the opening title, and then transitioning to an opening shot of New York City, with these subtle webs all over it, kind of representing in a way that New York City is Peter's web. This is his home, like to his spider, this is his web. Now, there are a lot of blanks to fill in here, because this isn't a complete opening credits. It says here that these are concept sketches, so I don't think this even existed in video form. They were just images made to kind of illustrate what he wanted this opening credits to be. While we haven't seen it in motion, I don't think I can kind of compare it to the final theatrical version, or say it's better, but on a conceptual level, I like it a little bit more. I feel like the symbiote transforming into these sort of ink kind of illustrations of the events of the previous film was a really awesome idea and an awesome way of telling that story. In the final version, we do see the symbiote in the opening credits, but you don't have that stark contrast between light and darkness, which is what I think this version of the opening credits was going for with its very stark sort of black on white look. The duality of Spider-Man and the black suit Spider-Man is just felt more here, and it feels like it tells us a lot about what has happened, but also what lies ahead. We did get that with the Spider-Man 3 opening credits in the final version, with the symbiote climbing around the webs that make up the opening credits, as well as some of the opening credits having like this sort of sand transition, but I think this sort of ink version is a little less on the nose. And just a bit more unique, it just looks very, very different from the previous two titles that came before it, whereas Spider-Man 3's actual theatrical opening credits, they're good. They're really good, don't get me wrong, but they're definitely not as inventive as this would have been. I would love to see like a VFX artist on YouTube or something actually make this happen, make these opening credits a reality. That would be pretty awesome. There's some really talented people out there. I will be putting a link to Hee-Bok Lee's website in the description below as well, so you can kind of check out his other works if you want to see them, and look at these pictures for yourself in their full resolution glory, as they really are a sight to behold. And I love to just see things from an alternate version of one of my favorite films. Yes, that's right, I love Spider-Man 3, I'm willing to go to bat for it. I've made an entire video on it on my channel if you want to go check that out. It has to be said, I do miss the grand and gigantic opening credit sequences of older superhero films, like the Christopher Reeve Superman films, where you get John Williams' Superman theme accompanied by a little tour through space with those sort of 3D opening credits coming at you. And of course, the big grand Spidey opening credits. Films these days don't tend to have that, but then again, they have it at the end of the movie instead. I love those little sort of school scrapbook-inspired end credit sequences from the MCU Spider-Man films. They're very different from what we got in the Raimi movies, but they're creative and have a lot of charm of their own. So it's not like we don't get any inventive title work these days, just usually it's saved for the end. But I liked having it at the beginning because you can really get sucked into the experience that way. But hey, I guess films these days are made for a more fast-paced, sort of easily distracted audience, I don't know. It's a staple of the times, I guess. Well, anyway, what do you guys think? Comment below and discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below are the links to Hee-Bok Lee's website, Lee's fundraiser, and of course my social media feeds, as well as my Patreon and join button for if you're feeling extra supportive and extra generous, but of course, you don't have to do that. That's a big ask. I'd never expect that of you. What matters is that you're here. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys, and have a great day.